Hi everybody, welcome to your history class recording for Thursday, April 26, 2018. It is Thursday. Tomorrow, I'm just going to give you a heads up, tomorrow and Monday will be makeup days for anybody who was out at testing or if you're behind on any lessons. So that's what we're looking forward to for Friday and Monday. More information will come to you through your class announcements. So today for Thursday, we're going to cover the next lesson, which is lesson 9 in unit 11, and it covers chapter 50 in our book. Things we're going to learn about today. We're going to talk about civil unrest in the United States during the 1960s. And we're going to give some examples of what that was, and we're going to talk about some of the groups that participated. And we're going to do a quick review of what's going on with the Vietnam War. So that is first on our agenda. I'm going to go ahead and have a video for you to watch, which is a very quick recap of Vietnam War. In a moment, the link will pop up and you can watch that video. Whenever you finish watching, come on back and continue with the recording. Okay, so that was a recap on how the Vietnam War kind of came together. And if you remember in our last lesson, we learned about this Gulf of Tonkin incident. And it's important to remember that this was the event that gave President Johnson the legal authority to send United States troops into Vietnam and have the United States become officially involved in the war. Up until that point, in order to get involved in a conflict or a war, the president can't do that on his own. Only Congress can approve the United States involvement in a war. But if we are attacked by someone first, then the president has the right to send troops and get involved. And that's what happened with that Gulf of Tonkin incident. So the Gulf of Tonkin resolution that was written said to take all necessary measures to repel or go against an armed attack against the forces of the United States and to prevent further aggression. So that is the official declaration of war. But the question was, did that incident really happen? There are a lot of people now, after some time passed and investigations were done, said that it really didn't happen. It was really somebody giving misinformation, or there's a theory that maybe it was all made up just so Johnson can get us into the war. There's a lot of different theories about the fact that this incident didn't really happen. They did not really attack our ship. It was either a mistake or it was a complete lie. So Johnson had been saying all along that the United States isn't going to war. We're just helping out. But the fact is, behind the scenes, he really was preparing for us to go to war. And getting our military ready and so forth. And in the beginning, he says we're only targeting military things in Vietnam. We are not hurting innocent people. But as time went on, and we have lots of TV reporters now going to Vietnam to cover this conflict, we're seeing images coming back from Vietnam that's showing a different story. There were innocent people getting hurt, villages being destroyed in that country, and people in the United States began to say, hey, this is not what we signed up for. We were told that this was just going to be a military conflict. So anti-war protesting begins in the United States. And so during this time period, we have so many different things going on. Remember, people are getting very upset about the Vietnam War, especially young people, because ultimately in the case of a war, young people are the ones who are asked to go and fight. So many of these protests are happening on college campuses. At the same time, we have all these other social changes going on in the United States. We still have civil rights being worked on, but at the same time now, our civil rights leaders begin to also protest the war. Martin Luther King leads a very big group who is anti-war. And a lot of changes are happening in our country because things in the South are changing as a result of the civil rights legislation that is passed. And what happens is, and if you read it in our book, it explains why, but what happens is a lot of black families begin leaving the South and moving into the North. And most of the reasons that they're doing that is because they're looking for work. In the South, there's a lot of farming that happens, especially cotton farming. And with the revolution of industry and machinery that is invented to help farmers, a lot of the people who used to work on the farms are no longer needed. Now they have machines that do their jobs. So these people have lost their jobs. So they began moving north by hundreds of thousands into cities in the North looking for jobs. So a lot of black families who used to live in farming areas are now moving into cities. So many, many changes going on at that time. So let's talk about what happens when people left the country and moved into the city. And you can see this little graph that shows the timeline of that happening. But what happened is so many people moved into these cities like Detroit and Chicago and places like that, that the cities were not ready to handle all these new people. They didn't have the housing. They didn't have the schools. They didn't have transportation, and jobs were becoming a problem. And also the police force, which protects people in these big cities, wasn't big enough to, handle all these new people. So lots of problems begin, as you can imagine. One of the problems that happens is as these black families move into the cities and they start to compete with the people who already live there, who are predominantly white, they're competing to get the same jobs. So now we have a little bit of competition, which ultimately leads to America being divided again along the lines of race. The whites are blaming the blacks for taking their jobs. The blacks are blaming the whites for their terrible living conditions. And our cities are falling apart. In many cities, the mayors of the cities are trying to do the best they can to improve things, improve the transportation system, to get more housing for people, to improve the schools, but they're not happening fast enough. And so all this competition and arguing going on between blacks and whites is starting to change the way we used to say we could get along, but now it's pulling us apart again. And that segregation that happened in the South is kind of happening in the North now, but it's really just turned to discrimination. Both sides start to take matters into their own hands, and when that happens, it's like an explosion. So this explosion happens in these big cities. The black people don't want to wait anymore to get the justice they think they deserve. They left the segregated South because they were not treated right there. They moved to the North in the cities where they thought it was going to be equal and better, but it turns out it's not better for them. So independently, these black power groups begin to take control in the cities. And one of the most famous groups is called the Black Panther Party. You may have heard of that. And they don't have any patience. They don't want to wait for the government in these cities to fix things. They want to get it done now, and they're going to get it done their way. And so now they start encouraging people to rise up and fight against the government, fight against the white people in the cities. And as you can imagine, nothing good comes from that kind of attitude. And what actually turns out to happen is they start recruiting other groups to join them and form more power groups. And we have something then that arises called Brown Power, which are Mexican groups, and they start fighting because they feel that they're being discriminated against as well. And as a result, some bad things start to happen. Their intentions were good. All they really wanted was equal rights for everybody as citizens. But they got too physical. They started to fight people in the streets. They started to tear down cities. They started to burn things. And their new slogan was "Burn, Baby, Burn." Because they thought if they did some bad things that it would draw attention to the wrongs that were happening in their city. They thought in the end it would help. But didn't really always help the way they wanted it to. So, I don't know, something to think about is, do you think that that's going about it the wrong way? If you want change to happen, how do you make it happen? Do you force it to happen, or do you talk about it and ask for it and work on it slowly? That was the conflict. Some people were willing to wait for it to change slowly, and other people didn't want to wait anymore. So all these changes happening in these cities were very hard. Many people were afraid to leave their homes because they didn't understand what was happening out in the streets of these cities. Anger started to spread between all of the groups, and more division came between blacks and whites and Latinos. And over time, this led to violence. And their original peaceful protesting that Martin Luther King promoted and encouraged, that changed into forceful, violent activities. "We shall overcome" changed to "Burn, Baby, Burn." All right, so I want to talk about what happened. There was much of this started in Los Angeles in 1965. There was a big riot in Los Angeles, and it lasted for days and days and days. People were killed, people were hurt, and the city was destroyed. And this was because these power groups that were promoting civil unrest let it get out of control. So I want to talk about what is the difference between these two phrases: civil disobedience and civil unrest. So we're going to pause the video, and you guys are going to watch another video. A link's going to pop up here in a minute. So go ahead and watch and come on back. All right, so you learned about what civil disobedience was. Civil disobedience is not violent, gets attention for a cause, and might lead to change. Civil unrest is often violent and out of control. It gets negative attention, and it hurts the cause, and most likely will not lead to any changes. So which way do you think is the better way to make change? Yeah, I definitely think civil disobedience. If you want to stand up for a cause, that's the way to do it. All right, so what were these people protesting anyway? All kinds of stuff was getting protested in the 1960s. Discrimination against blacks. Then equal pay for women. Women started to jump into this protesting thing. We're going to talk more about that coming up. The end of the Vietnam War, and all of these things need to be improved. Education, housing, living conditions in our cities. So you might want to jot this stuff down for your notes. All right, my recorder's going to run out of time here, so if you want to pause and copy these questions, you may find the answers in your book. I will put the answers up in the online school under lesson 9. You do have a graded assignment in your online school. Please do that now. And make sure you've read chapter 50, and then have a great day.